So that's a pretty powerful critique of aid. What's the case for aid, recognising those downsides? I think twofold. One is, whilst policy conditionality is clearly disastrous, I think there is some role for what I'd call governance conditionality, where we're not trying to get a government to do something that is against the wishes of that society. We're just trying to get a government to enforce its own laws. In no society is corruption legal, but many societies, many public officials are corrupt. And so it's perfectly reasonable for aid to say a condition for receiving aid is that you build effective checks against the looting of public money by public officials. So that seems to me entirely legitimate. It's just encouraging a society to enforce its own laws. Possibly also some political conditionality, such as, if you're going to have elections, please conduct them properly, potentially with international monitors to establish that they're being properly conducted. But let's look at the economic upside to aid, and there is one. There are a number of situations where, without aid, economic development is going to be much harder. I'll give you one example. Go back to our module on urbanization. Getting urbanization going is expensive. You need a lot of infrastructure before you build the revenue flow. Eventually, if you put in place good taxation of the appreciation in land values and such forth, urbanization pays for itself, but there's big investments up front. Aid can help to pay for that. The second, we've looked at small isolated economies, like South Sudan. It's a vital global public interest that societies like South Sudan become prosperous, join the rest of mankind in prosperity. For that, they have to be well connected to the global economy. Remember, isolation is doom in economic terms. But connecting very isolated places to the world economy, the infrastructure that connects them is often very expensive. And so that's a reasonable thing for the world to pay for. If we want them to join us, we will need to help pay for it. Because these countries may well be too poor ever to be able to finance this connectivity themselves. Third very important use of aid is to incentivize reputable firms to go to places where they won't make much money, but there'll be a big public interest in them going there. Often a firm will be a pioneer investor in a market. That pioneer investor, if the investment is successful, will attract imitators. The imitators are very good for the country, but they're bad for the firm. That's what I've just described is what economists call an externality. There's a public benefit that doesn't benefit the firm. And so if we don't compensate for that public benefit, the firm won't take it into account, and so there'll be too little pioneering investment. The poorest societies, an awful lot of private investment that's needed would be pioneering investment because there's so little there at the moment. The firm will be the first in a sector, the first in a market. And so it's very sensible to have public money matching the private investment and basically rewarding that public interest that the private investment generates. One way of doing that is to bear some of the risks. Finally, in countries that probably have natural resources but haven't discovered them yet, remember the starting point is to get some public geological information. That's costly. It's a very sensible use of international aid to say, we will start the public geological information, we'll pay for that. That will then get you going. Maybe there's nothing there, but a very poor country can't afford the public geological information that says There's nothing there. It's too poor to take those sort of risks. And so there are a range of investments where it's sensible for the international community to pay for them. They pump prime other activities.